Jeff from Two Hacks Garage. Well, in the last video, you saw us go ahead and install the crankshaft on this small block Chevy. Now, mind you, this is going to be that 388 cubic inch stroker. We're putting in that 1988 or 1980 Z28 for my friend Todd. That's Project Fast Times. So in this video, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to install the pistons and rings on the rods. Now, mind you, these are pressed in. They're not bushed, which makes it a whole lot easier. So what we got going on here, which came with a complete balanced rotating assembly from Eagle Industries. One, rods. This is their SIR rod. It's a very good rod. As you can see, it's bushed. It does come with ARP hardware, which is very nice, and also King bearings, just like we have in here for our crankshaft. The pistons that we're using, that also came with the kit. It's a Keith Black piston. This engine is 60 thousandths over, so it's a 60 thousandths piston. As you can see, it's got a nice coating on the side skirts here for wear. Overall, it's a very good choice for a street engine. And on top of that, to make everything seal up in those freshly bored and honed cylinders, we have made in the USA Hastings Pistons rings. So yeah, this is going to be a solid setup for a good street engine. Makes really good power, and it's going to last. So with that, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to get started on showing you how to do this in the other room. Mind you, to save some time, we went ahead and already labeled the cylinders on here, which is always a good idea if you're new to this, and we've also labeled the pistons. If you look here, like this is number 4, so it's going to go in the number 4 hole. You can see it's corresponding. And mind you, there is a chamfer, which I'll show you real quick just to get this out of the way, which we'll go in more in depth on this. So if you look on these rods, there's a larger chamfer there and a smaller chamfer there. That smaller chamfer always goes to the center of the actual journal. Both of them go together. The larger ones go to the outside. I just wanted to get that out of the way just in case I forgot later on. Most likely I wouldn't. Jimmy would have reminded me. So yeah, that's what we're going to do in this video. If we got time, we'll show you how to torque these down and all that and check them with plastic gauge, but that might have to be for another video. Along with that too, we'll be showing you how to check rod side clearance. And on top of that, we're going to show you how to check deck height, which is a pretty cool tool here that I got from Proform. So with that, I'm rambling enough. I'm going to go in the other room with Jimmy, give him a hand, and we'll go over this, show us how it's done, and go from there. See you soon.
Okay. It's very important, like this is number 2, top side, or where the lifters are. Spark plug side. Valve relief, go to the top on a small block Chevy. Once again, Jeff had explained the chamfer goes to the crankshaft side. The short side, the small chamfer, goes connecting rod to connecting rod, how they set in the engine. There again, the chamfer here goes to the radius on the back side. So this is timed correctly. I do like the evens, all the even numbers or all the odd numbers first, but this is timed correctly.
So what basically Jimmy is saying is prior to assembling all these, we have everything labeled and timed correctly, so the rods are oriented correctly to the cylinder and the pistons are oriented correctly to the rod. So what Jimmy's going to do is he's going to show you here how to do this. So that one is actually not assembled fully. We're just testing it out. So one of the first steps is you're going to oil up that where the journal goes in.
Where the wrist pin
goes in. And he's going to oil that up. But I'm going to put this on a tripod, so I'll be right back.
Okay. I'm lubing up the wrist pin into the rod. I've already got the holes in the pistons where the wrist pin goes. This is number 4. This is number 4. Now, number 4, this will be the same orientation as number 2. And the chamfer will be the same. But if you notice, the notches for the bearing tangs, if you notice the notches, the way it's installed on that rod, down. So valve release up, bearing tangs down. This is the correct way to orientate this rod onto the piston. Then all you have to do is push the wrist pin in, and these are full floaters, so then the next step after we get these in, we'll come back and we'll put the piston locks, the wrist pin locks in them. I'll be right back. But they probably got...
All right, so what Jimmy's doing is he's going to, like I said, he's assembling all the even ones first, and he's going to orient them correctly. And like I said, he's going to come back later, and he's going to put in the wrist pins after the fact. And the reason being is if something happens, you get them in there wrong, you can take one apart quickly, because the wrist pins aren't fun.
Now, on the Eagle rods, they're again very quality product. They have bronze bushings in the wrist pin end, and there's an oil hole right in the top. With the engine running, oil will come down that little hole, not under pressure, but just splash and oil the wrist pin.
So again, everything's oiled up, and mind you, you want clean surfaces on this when you do it, and press it in. So what I'm going to do, guys, since you saw 2 done, I'm just going to put this on time lapse, and you can watch the rest being taken care of. And when we go to do the actual keepers on these, we'll show you how that's done. See you in a few.
Do you?
The next step in this process, after getting your pistons oriented correctly, is installing these spiral locks into that groove. That's what holds the actual the bushing in there with the rod and the piston in place for moving. So there's a little groove in there, and you see your bushing, your wrist pin. All of that right there is held into place on each side by one of these things. It's called a spiral lock, UMXCs. It comes with a kit, and they can be a pain in the butt. There's some tools you can buy to make it easier, but what I'm going to do is show you how to do it with a vise. Mind you, that's aluminum, and you're hardly clamping any pressure on here. Let me show you that. So this is soft aluminum here, and you're barely applying any pressure to hold this into place. So basically the first step on this is, I'm only going to show you one. I'm not going to show you all because it'd make the video really, really long. So basically what you do is you take this clip here, you expand it out a little bit, and then from there you start it in this groove. If you don't do this a whole lot, it can be kind of a pain in the butt. So you get it started in that groove like that, and it's going to want to lock into place. And you'll want kind of like a little pick and a little bit of a
lot of luck.
Yeah, a lot of luck, because it is not very much fun. And you're going to push it down initially into the groove and work its way in there. Like Jimmy said, a lot of luck. You want to be careful working with this with the pistons. Just work it around. You kind of go one way with it first and the other way with it second. Because what happens is you set a little point right there. On the other side, it faces the other way, and it kind of locks it in there, so it has a little spring action. You just want to be careful, take your time. This is probably one of those good steps where you want to wear some safety goggles in case one of these things flies off. And you just work your way around.
Have a spare set of rods and pistons when you get mad and beat this one.
Yeah. Yeah. You're just going to work yourself around here like that. You see how it's kind of coming in? Watch this. Bam. We are locked into place. So you can see there now, it is all locked into place. Now when you're done with that, like I said, I've already done the other side on this. Like I said, it's just a very slight amount of pressure. If you look, everything's locked into place. Both of them are installed. Good to go. And I'm just going to time lapse the rest. See you in a few. All right, now that we got the spiral locks on the pistons and everything assembled onto the rods, the next step is gapping the piston rings. So our paperwork here came with the instructions on how much gap we should technically have, and that's important in different applications. So there's different stuff for what's considered naturally aspirated or boosted. Boosted will also include like nitrous. Streetcar, we're sticking with naturally aspirated. So you're going to take the bore, which 4060 times the 0.0065 street naturally aspirated, and it's saying minimum of 0.026. We do our math on that, and it came out to 02639. So we're going to go 027 on that. Now the second ring, naturally aspirated also, it's saying 0.004 per inch of bore minimum, boosted 0.005 per inch is a bore. So when we did that, taking our bore times that naturally aspirated, it came out to be 16 thousandths. We're probably going to go a little bit err on side of caution and maybe go on the 17 side. So that's the first step of your piston rings before you can install them, is figuring out what you need to actually gap them at. The second step is seeing where they're currently at now. And I'll go ahead and show you how to do that real quick.
It's really weird.
All right.
I did the first cylinder.
So Jimmy's done the first cylinder to initially check this, and I did wipe him down. Mind you, we'll have to oil these up again and all that. But a good method to do this is actually pretty simple. You take a piston ring, and this happens just to be number 2, because mind you, they are going to be the same. And you're going to actually put it into the cylinder. And you need to make it square. So in order to do that, once you get it in there, that's got to be square in the cylinder. So a good way to do this is to actually use a square. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and go around here and make sure it's all pushed in the same length.
I have number 2. We'll get the oil rings on.
Okay. So now we're square in there. And now you measure the actual gap. And that's where you need a feeler gauge. So in order to know where we need to be or where we're at, use a feeler gauge on here. And I'm going to take one that's 20 thousandths. Try to go in there. It doesn't fit. So I'll go to the next one. I'll go down to 18 thousandths. That one doesn't fit. Go to 17. Nope. Okay, let's go to 16 thousandths. A little tight. Yeah, let's try 15 thousandths. Okay, so right there, 15 thousandths on the feeler gauge is fitting that. So we know where we're currently at now, and that means on that second ring, we need to open it up. Not a whole lot. We're going to go show you that process right now. See you in a few. All right, so the next step on this, and you do this per cylinder. You do them one at a time. You're going to measure each one. You're going to file each ring to fit each cylinder. So that's the number 2 ring right there.
How far off was it?
It was at 15, and we needed to go probably 17. Our math was like 16 and a half on that. So if you see here, we did our measurements. What Jimmy's going to do is, it's a piston ring filer, and you see how the ring kind of sits in there, and he's going to file one side, just one side of that. He's going to file the other side of that. All right. What you're going to do at that point is we're going to go see if it fits. All right, so we just did the method of actually putting the piston ring back into that cylinder and seeing if it works. Jimmy's going to measure it.
Yep, good.
What are we at?
18.
18 thousandths. We're good to go. So you know what? That's how you do it. And it's pretty simple. Not too bad at all. We got a whole bunch of ones to do here. So like I said, you're going to do this for each piston ring per the specs and install them on the pistons as you go so you don't get them mixed up. So the whole theory is if you're working on cylinder 1, you're going to do your measurements for piston number 1. You're going to do all your filing for number 1, and you're going to install them for number 1. That way nothing gets mixed up. So it's pretty self-explanatory, and we'll show you actually how to install them on the piston, and then we'll just time the lapse the rest from there. See you in a few. Alright, so what you saw is Jimmy went ahead and he sized up all the rings for one side of the engine, 2, 4, 6, and 8. Now we're going to put the piston rings on this. And as you saw, the oil ring just literally went on very easily around there. And there is no technical orientation up or down with it. And with the oil ring, there is a secondary ring with that. And it's the same thing. There is no orientation with it. And that's how you do it. So basically you just slide it around the piston.
Right here, you have to make sure those two edges, some rings will overlap. These really don't, they just butt together. But that's what, they have to remain like that. And if you notice here, I put the end gap for the spacer ring there, and on this side the other ring will be there.
So the second ring, real quick, it does have a so he's going to do the top of the oil ring. So he oriented those. So if you look on, there's a piston skirt on that side, and he put the gaps of them on the opposite side. That helps create a better seal. Now he's doing the second ring, and if you look at the second ring, it is labeled top.
You may not be able to see it, but it does say top faintly.
And it's because it's chamfered. So if you look on
right here.
if you look here, turn that around just a little bit, Jimmy. It's chamfered, but flip it this way a little bit, Jimmy. So if you look at the top side, or the top side of it, it's square.
If you look at it from this angle,
If you look at it from that angle, you can see it chamfered. If you look at the top side, it's square. And if you look at the bottom side, it's got that chamfer in it. The chamfer goes down.
but not always. It
Right.
depends on which manufacturer. Some people change it around.
So Jimmy just carefully winds this thing down. You don't want to break them. However, that being said, a broken piston ring does make a good tool to clean out piston grooves. So now you got that.
And then I always turn and put the ends over the wrist pin. That's the least movement of the piston.
So on this one here, as he just said, the gap is above that wrist pin. And when he does the other one, the top ring, the gap will be on the other side.
These rings are square. There's no chamfer. Thus, there's no little center punch or pip mark or marking to say top or bottom, so they can go either direction. Now bite me. There we go.
All right.
There we go.
So oil ring first, and you got your two smaller oil rings, top and bottom. You orient the end gaps to the opposite ends of the piston skirts.
It's coming back off.
Then you have your second ring. Make sure it's oriented correctly. And you'll put gap above one wrist pin, and the top one, orient it correctly, and the gap will be above the other piston wrist pin. Sorry, it's been a long day. So that is how you're going to install the actual rings on here. So what I'm going to do here is just watch Jimmy do this last one. And for the other 4 cylinders, I'm going to go ahead and put it on time lapse.
There was a little burr on it, so I fixed it.
Yeah, you also got to make sure the ends of the piston rings are burr free and that they move freely. So that's how you do it. So I'm going to go grab my tripod and we'll just time lapse the other set of these. See you in a few. All right, we are finally done with all that. Takes a little bit of time to do, but as you saw in that video, we assembled our rods and pistons and installed the pistons rings. Kind of a quick recap on that was orienting the pistons to all the cylinders, make sure you have all that right, because there is different chamfers on here, different ways they go. Got everything numbered, and then we installed the wrist pins on here, made sure they're oiled. And then the fun part was those spiral locks. That's going to take a lot of time on that if you don't do them all the time. Like I said, they make specialty tools with it, but we did it the old-fashioned way. And then from there, what we ended up doing is we fitted the cylinders with the piston rings, and it went from the paperwork. Now, always mind you, follow your build. If it's naturally aspirated, boosted, or nitrous, follow your ring gap specs per the manufacturer. So what we did is we fitted them in each cylinder, we filed each one down and matched them up with the pistons, got them all set up here as you see, everything's numbered, everything is ready to go. We also showed how to orient those on the actual piston itself. So yeah, it does take a little bit of time to get all that done, but you know what, it's really not that bad. Simple math skills, some tools, maybe a couple specialty tools like a piston ring filer. But you know what, actually went pretty well, went pretty smooth. Pretty happy with it. So in the next video, what you're going to see is us actually installing these pistons and checking our rod side clearance, and then checking our bearing clearance on the journals. With that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and call this video done. We got a whole lot more work to do, and we'll see you tomorrow. Later.